two nations. Two eras. Though separated by time, their paths to populist nationalism bear striking similarities. What lessons can we learn from the rise of fascism in early 20th century Italy and the resurgence of ethno-nationalism in the United States since 2016? Populist nationalism often thrives during times of crisis. In the years following World War I, Italy was mired in debt, political instability, and mass unemployment. Historian R.J.B. Bosworth describes this period as one of permanent turbulence, where citizens felt abandoned by traditional institutions. In the United States, echoes of this turbulence appeared not only in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, but also in a cascade of crises since 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic upended daily life, exacerbating economic inequality and leaving millions unemployed. Rising inflation and housing instability further strained middle and working-class families. Politically, deep divisions over pandemic measures, vaccines, and social justice movements created an atmosphere of mistrust and fear, making fertile ground for populist rhetoric. In both cases, leaders emerged who promised not just change but restoration, invoking a nostalgic vision of national greatness. As historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat writes in Strongmen Mussolini to the Present, these leaders capitalize on the fears and desires of their people, promising security in exchange for loyalty. Benito Mussolini, a former socialist journalist, became the face of a new political movement. He proclaimed, "I am here to defend the nation," positioning himself as Italy's savior. Mussolini's image as Il Duce was central to the fascist regime's propaganda efforts. A personality cult was built around him, presenting him as the unifying force of Italian society. This cult helped reconcile Italian citizens with the fascist regime, even when they were dissatisfied with local officials. Mussolini's rise wasn't without force. His Black Shirts, a paramilitary group, intimidated political opponents and violently suppressed dissent. Historian Emilio Gentile refers to this as squadrismo, a form of political violence that blurred the lines between party politics and outright warfare. But violence alone didn't secure Mussolini's power. He mastered the art of propaganda. He once said, "The press of Italy is free, free to obey me." By dominating newspapers and radio, Mussolini crafted an image of himself as the ultimate protector of Italian values. Nearly a century later, echoes of Mussolini's rise appeared in the United States. Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, with its promise to "Make America Great Again," resonated with voters who felt left behind by globalization and cultural shifts. As political scientist Pippa Norris notes in Cultural Backlash, populist leaders gain traction when traditional norms are disrupted, creating a sense of cultural displacement. However, this rhetoric had dangerous ripple effects. Hate crimes in the United States surged during Trump's presidency. According to FBI data, hate crimes reached their highest levels in over a decade in 2019. With attacks targeting racial, religious, and LGBTQ+ groups. One of the most glaring examples was the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups openly marched through the city, chanting slogans like, "Jews will not replace us." The violence culminated in the tragic murder of counter-protester Heather Heyer, when a white supremacist drove his car into a crowd. In 2020, far-right factions became more visible and emboldened. Armed militias like the Proud Boys and Boogaloo Boys disrupted Black Lives Matter protests and even plotted attacks. The Anti-Defamation League reported that white supremacist propaganda surged by 120% that year, marking an unprecedented rise in recruitment efforts. Where Mussolini relied on newspapers and radio, Trump leveraged social media to amplify his message. This direct, unfiltered communication emboldened extremist groups who saw his language as a validation of their ideologies. Ruth Ben-Ghiat warns in Strongmen, When leaders speak in coded language, it emboldens their supporters to act out their violent fantasies. The parallels between Mussolini's Italy and Trump's America are not just historical curiosities, they are warnings. Divisive rhetoric has real-world consequences. It doesn't just polarize society, it creates fertile ground for violence, systemic oppression, and the erosion of justice and equity. But the danger doesn't stop there. Unchecked populism becomes a vehicle for authoritarianism. When leaders exploit fear and division, they weaponize inequality and concentrate power in ways that perpetuate oppression and silence dissent. History tells us that silence and complacency are not options. To create a society rooted in justice, we must confront oppressive rhetoric head-on, amplify the voices of the marginalized, and demand accountability from those who wield power.